Yeah, I really love what you're doing. So I want to say thank you. I think that out of some difficult things, we're planting seeds for better things, and you're
No
definitely
doubt.
doing that. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
No, I'm so excited to hear about your children's books and that Joe's Inventions book. That's crazy.
That was fun. Yeah, that
Yeah,
one book was a catalyst for about three others.
yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, your name, your business, and let's roll.
Okay. So my name is Christina Gadar or Christina Maria Gadar. I am half Brazilian, so we tend to go by two first names,
Okay,
Cristina Maria, but Christina is fine. And my business is Gadar Pilates.
okay, awesome. So can we talk about your children's books right out the gate?
Sure. So the first book that I did with children in mind turned out to be a manual. It started while I was working with a little boy who lived on my street. I have a home-based studio here in Florida, and I'm going to try to keep it together. It's still tough, but he was 7 years old and he was diagnosed with leukemia.
Mm,
And he passed away when he was 9. And he
oh,
was a very close friend of my son. And whew, and he was in my daughter's grade.
yes.
So when I was working with him, I was totally inspired. He came to me at a time when I really needed him too,
Mm,
because I would say prior to him coming to me, I had probably been pretty depressed for 4 solid months. I'm a huge animal lover. And exactly a year after my mentor, Ramana, passed away, to the day, my first dog that I had as an adult passed away, exactly
mm,
a year after. And there was a sense of guilt too, because I had left her with a pet sitter for just one night to go to my son's state jiu-jitsu tournament. We went to support him and came back the next day. And yes, she was older. She was 18 years, 8 months. She was a little
oof.
chihuahua. And she was my little mascot. She stayed in the studio. Everybody loved her. She's the type of dog that lifts up the upper lip to smile and greet everybody. And there was this sense of guilt because I'd left her, but I had no idea that she was in that condition. She died within an hour of me
Mm,
coming home. And so I had a really hard time because this was a family member that I had spent at that time. That was the year I was turning 40. So I had spent half my life with her. She was with
mhm.
me when I was single. She was with me when I was a professional dancer, when I started dating, when I got married, when I changed careers, when I bought a house, through both of my pregnancies. She was with me through everything.
Yeah,
So it was a really hard adjustment. And even though I grew up with many, many animals, she was the one that I had adopted. And it
yes.
was really, really hard. So I found myself having a hard time to get out of this cloud, even though I had this business and I have two wonderful children, a wonderful husband, a supportive family. And by working with Benji, I think someone basically shook me and said, "Wake up. You're
Yes.
lucky. You need to
Yes.
recognize what you have and not what you don't have." And to
Mm.
to to have a student come in my doors, I'm going to take a sip because I had a little cold this weekend. Sorry. So, to have a student come into my doors and know that he had had 3 different types of chemotherapy the day before, and he didn't complain once when he was taking his lesson with me.
Ouch.
I always say that he taught me more than I taught him.
Absolutely.
And, and, you know, so working with him was a catalyst for me to really delve into teaching children Pilates. I always tell my kids when they were little, because I'm half Brazilian, but I grew up and was born in the United States, Portuguese is my second language. My husband is from Russia, so Russian is his first language. So we tried to teach our kids from a very young age Portuguese and Russian. Ironically, they speak Portuguese way better than Russian because, us women, I guess, talk more, but I was adamant that I wasn't going to speak to them in English, even though it was my second language,
Yes.
Portuguese. So the way I got them to appreciate it was I told them that it has value.
Yes.
You know, you have to know that something has value. That's why you're going to do it.
That's what you're gonna
And
do
I
it. Yeah.
realized that working with Benji, working with my kids, working with the kids at my daughter's ballet school at the time, or jujitsu school, or basketball camp, I realized that teaching children Pilates has value. And
Mhm.
so I wanted to be able to get something together for other teachers because, quite frankly, I was intimidated with Benji because of the chemotherapy. I spoke to one of my close teachers, Anthony Rabara, and we both agreed that my instinct to put him on equipment was correct because he needed the support. You know,
Yes.
we know that the mat work takes the most energy of all because we don't have a headrest or a footbar or springs to support us. So I knew I had to do that, but I was intimidated because what was the first thing that I had written in my notebook when I was going through my apprenticeship? No kids under the age of 16 on the equipment. So here I was with a
Mm.
7-year-old, knowing
Right.
that I needed to do that, but how am I going to do it? How am I going to keep it safe? And how am I going to keep it really Pilates? I didn't want to teach him like a creative dance class. I wanted to teach him Pilates.
Yeah.
So I worked with my kids, and the minute I gave my kids the permission to get on the equipment, it was totally changed. They felt privileged to be able to be on the equipment, and
Yes.
it's great because if I see a shift in the eyes, I know, okay, let's take them somewhere else. You know, reboot. Let's reset
Yes.
this and get their
Get them
interests
engaged
back in.
again. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So it was really wonderful. So I decided to write the book, and Benji knew about it, and he was also excited about that. And my daughter, she decided that she could draw the equipment as it might look in the eyes of a child. So that
Mm.
was catalyst number one. Aside from the Pilates Children Manual, then
Yes.
we created another book called Discovering Joe Pilates because I'm also fascinated with the history of the equipment.
Yes.
So we took her drawings where a reformer turns into a skateboard or a ladder barrel looks like a snail. You know,
So creative.
it was a wonder chair looks like a jack in the box. And we wanted to do that because one of my students said that these drawings were so fantastic. And he said, but it's too bad that only your teachers who buy the manual will see them. So I said, okay, I'm going to figure out a way.
Yeah.
So, so my daughter and my son, we did little limericks to go with the pictures of the equipment, and then another limerick to go with the drawing. And I wrote a little bit about the history of each piece. The other catalyst from that main manual was Pre-Pilates. I wrote a Pre-Pilates book for
Hmm.
teachers and students because I had a whole chapter on Pre-Pilates in that manual. I totally fell in love with it. I just taught a Zoom class this morning all on Pre-Pilates. And I saw this really has value. I mean, these are exercises that we're going to use. We see a lot of
Yes.
things on social media, these fancy, like I've shown the squirrel and these fancy things that we can do, but who's really going to do that? That's nice for us to show, but
Yes.
at the end of the day, what is the heart and soul of Pilates? And it's going to be these pre-Pilates exercises and the reformer and the mats and the standing weights and these types of things.
Yes.
So that also sprouted from that children's book. And then I had also written a chapter on the Pilates animals workout. So I
Yes. I
was,
saw that too. Yeah.
yeah, that was the last
Fascinating.
one. So my daughter, when she was 9, she did drawings, 30 drawings of different animals. And I didn't want to, again, I didn't want to change what Pilates is, but put the name Pilates. It's still Pilates, but when we look at the exercises, we might think of something else, a different animal. We know that
Yes.
Joseph Pilates, he was really influenced by observing animals. And so I wanted to be able to do something like that because kids, they really relate to animals. There's a reason why all of these children's stories have lots of animals as the characters. They really
Yes.
identify with animals.
Hmm.
So we did that. And so something like, for example, the mermaid, that was an exercise that Ramana put into the mat work.
Hmm.
And so when we would fold our arm over and turn, you know, our legs are stacked, it's like a mermaid. But then she gave me the cue once to curl myself into a little snail. So I said, okay, that now is going to be the snail exercise.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
we just found different ways, or things from the reformer mats where you're sliding, you're on your hands and your toes and you're sliding your feet back and forth. That now is like the water strider. I was really interested in those little water bugs that,
Yes.
go over water. So, okay, that reminds me of that gliding motion. So we
Yes.
just we just put little fun facts
So
about each
creative.
animal.
Yeah.
And the weird thing, Martin, is that I don't consider myself creative in any way whatsoever. But
Right.
but now I guess I can say that I have a little bit of creativity in me, because when I was a dancer and as a Pilates teacher, I always go by what either the choreographer gave me or my teacher gives me,
Yes.
and I try to develop from there and really dive deep into that exercise or that
Right.
movement. But I don't try to. I'm not a type of person who wants to invent something new on the Cadillac. There's enough for
Yes.
me to sink my
Right.
teeth into.
Hmm.
What was the other one that came from that? Discovering Joe, Pilates Animals, Pre-Pilates. Yeah, so those four books, Pre-Pilates, Pilates Animals Workout, Discovering Joe, and the Pilates for Children, they're all basically from the same headspace.
Yes.
And then I
Yes.
have the first book, the Pilates and Interactive Workbook,
Hmm.
and then the Wonder Chair.
Yes.
So even though there's six books, really those four were
Oh,
really
one.
one, yeah, and
Yes.
then the other two. But it was a
Tara,
good experience.
see a comment here. Tara Rose is saying, I have the pre-Pilates manual and I love it. I draw from it for all my clients, no matter their level.
Yeah, and no matter the age too, because I think
Yeah.
we tend to think that pre-Pilates is just for seniors, and it's fantastic for seniors, especially with Zoom. It's been giving me a lot of things that I can give to my senior students, so we can vary it. So it's not just mat or standing weights, magic
Right.
circle. They love it. Gives
Right.
them more of a sense, like you were asking me about my message to students, and I would say that the whole reason I started that first book was to give my students a sense of autonomy.
Autonomy.
You
Right.
know,
Yes.
I don't want them to feel like, if, I'm the only teacher in my space. So if I have to go out of town, or if I have to take a day off or more, I don't want them to think that, okay, well, hanging out my Pilates
I'm off.
socks,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
no need to work out. I want them, if I do my job correctly, I think that they should be able to do a lot of this on their own
Absolutely.
confidently.
Yeah.
And then the workbook was just to give them a little bit of a sense of confidence that they could do it.
Yeah, that guideline is so key, right? That just, if nothing else, it gives them confidence with what they already know if we've done a good job instructing them. And
Yeah.
I like what you're saying about the pre-Pilates too. And coming from a personal training background, I think of pre-Pilates the same as, a personal trainer or a sport conditioning specialist would say movement prep,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
this is your movement prep. This is your dynamic warm up before we get into the workout. And on those demanding days where we're maybe doing, Olympic lifts or something, you may
Mm-hmm.
do a dynamic warm up for half an hour and then do your workout for 20 minutes and then cool down with other exercises.
Yeah.
And pre-Pilates becomes like that. Like I'm sure when you're doing pre-Pilates with people, they're like, this is a workout. Like,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like this
Absolutely.
isn't like we're
I was
waiting to start the
telling,
workout.
yeah, this morning when I taught the pre-Pilates class, and this was for teachers and apprentices, I told them that one of my students a few months ago, she's a nurse and she works in the sleep clinic, and she had to lift on her own, and she's tiny. She had to lift a 400-pound patient onto the bed by herself. She ended up throwing her back out. She didn't want to
Yes.
cancel her Zoom lesson with me. So she greeted me sitting in her chair and she said, I can only sit in my chair today. So whatever you can give me is fine as long as it's done sitting in the chair. So we did a lot of seated pre-Pilates where there
Hmm.
was no lack of exercises. And I was, trying to give my energy as we did it. And the next day I get up in the morning. I know this is kind of crude, but I go to sit down to go to the bathroom and my butt hurt because I was squeezing my seat so much as I was doing
Yes.
it. I got
Yes.
very sore from doing pre-Pilates, and it is a workout. It definitely is.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not, it may be basic, but it's not simple.
Right, exactly. And Antoine is saying Christina is the best with pre-Pilates. So you're like the
Oh,
pre-Pilates
thank you.
queen. Yes.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know about that. But I don't think I'm queen of anything in Pilates because I do consider myself always a student.
Yes.
But maybe you can help me with this, Martin, because I was thinking I spent nearly 10 years writing all of these books. That was a
Wow.
lot of energy and a lot of emotion, a lot of money, a lot of time.
Mm,
And so I have this sense of satisfaction, but now the fear is that that will become complacency. And I
ah,
need to make sure. So one of the things that I found that's going to help me transition to this phase where I'm no longer writing is to offer these Zoom classes.
mhm.
So Antoine has been, he was joking, he's like my manager in France. We have a
Okay.
lot of French participants in these classes. And today we also had, from Korea, from Italy, I think, and also from the United States. But
Amazing.
that's been really fun for me. But maybe you have some advice, but I want to make sure that I don't, I think you always have to want something. The minute you think you have it, then you lose that hunger.
Right.
So I'm now in a transition phase and
Mm.
kind of getting off of the writing, which is enough. 6 books
Yeah.
is good. And
Plenty.
my family wants me to be back again, and that's good. But
Mm.
now it's what's the next thing? Or when is enough enough?
Right.
I have my clients on Zoom and I have my clients, the few that come in person. Now I have this class. I do like mentoring. I do like staying within my umbrella of my organization with Romanos Pilates.
Hmm.
So it's really, I'm in this phase now, kind of almost like a limbo, where I'm
Yes.
trying to find out, well, because that's just my personality. What's the next
What's
thing that
next?
I'm going to obsess over, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah. Well,
So we'll
I know
see.
that's, and people in the comment section, feel free to add your comments and questions. That's interesting phase. I mean, because sometimes
Hmm.
people are complacent, some people aren't even ambitious, and some people are
Hmm.
always chasing after the next thing. So the
Yeah.
question I always have for people when they're in somewhere in that continuum is like, can you enjoy today?
Right. And that's funny you say that because that was one of the things that I wrote you that I'm trying to send a message to my students that there is no better than here. And yet I'm struggling right now to just enjoy the present.
Right.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I think that's what I needed to hear.
You're right on track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true because I never said this publicly, but I went through my Pilates apprenticeship very fast. I did not rush in any way whatsoever. I was
Okay.
coming straight off of a professional ballet career.
Hmm.
So I had a lot of physical and mental stamina to get through 8-hour days. I would drive 3 hours to Fort Myers from Sarasota, do a full day of Pilates apprenticeship there, drive 3 hours back, and I did that every day, I think 6 days a week. But I went through the program in less than 5 months, which is
Wow.
almost unheard of. But I
Yes.
mean, I was ready. And the odd thing is, even though I had to start working, I was able to do it that way also because I wasn't working at the same time. I
Hmm.
was depending on my husband, who was still dancing. He now is an acupuncture physician, but at the time just two people on one dancer's salary, that's hard enough with one dancer on one dancer's salary. So I knew I needed
Right.
to get to work, but I also recognized that from my experience as a dance student, I was always thinking ahead of each day, thinking, oh, how great it's going to be when I'm a professional dancer. I don't think I valued the time I had as a student. I had some amazing, amazing
I see where you're
things
going.
happen when I was
Yes.
a student. So I
Hmm.
told myself when I was going through the apprenticeship, I'm going to savor each day because I'm not going to have the chance to take care of my body in the same way when I'm teaching and taking care of others, although I have to find
Yes.
it. And
Right.
in a way, all these Zoom classes that we have available almost makes me feel like I'm an apprentice again because I'm able
Right.
to see these teachers more frequently. That's been wonderful. But I definitely didn't I know it doesn't sound that way with it being less than 5 months, but I did not rush the process. I was just able to attend every day and be there and have 8-hour days consecutively. But
Yes.
I savored every single moment of it
Fantastic.
because I knew that it's, you can't rely on what it's going to be. You have to just be
Yes.
in the moments.
Right.
So
And
that was
time
something
is
that's,
it sorry to say time is fleeting, right? Like I reckon that you just had
yeah.
this window of time where you could immerse yourself in it and you did.
Yeah. Yeah, and we were really lucky at the time because that was just when Romana's Pilates was starting to branch off out of New York. So it
Hmm.
just fell into my lap that I was able to drive to Fort Myers. Actually, I said 3 hours. It's an hour and a half each way, so 3 hours a day of driving, and then
Yes.
the apprenticeship, getting my hours there. But we had Juanita from Chicago came to Fort
Hmm.
Myers to give me my basic practical test. Shari, Romana's daughter, came to give me my written and practical intermediate. I was terrified of her. I don't know why, but I think people were making me feel. My husband reminds me I was more frightened to get tested by Shari than I was to go to New York and get tested by Romana.
Wow.
And
Yes.
it was interesting because then when I went to New York, I stayed with Daria, and she had other teachers with her. I was in a trundle drawer, and Enza from Italy was on the bed on top. And it was wonderful to be able to go that early in the morning and walk with Daria to the studio and have that experience. But the first day I walked into that studio and I told Romana, I'm here because I'm getting ready to test with you for my final exam. She kind of crossed her arms and she said, "What's this? I've never seen you before. How could you possibly be testing with me?" She wasn't used to this idea of how it was expanding.
Expanding.
So, yeah, so I really had to prove myself. She gave me all of her toughest clients, I was told by Daria. And I don't know why. I felt really confident when I went there. Now, 20 years later, if I had that same situation, I think I would have felt so nervous. I don't know why
You probably
it
would have
didn't.
overthought it now, right?
Yeah, yeah. For
Yeah.
some reason, it didn't faze me at all. But now I would have. You're right. I would have overthought every single thing I did. But I loved it, and I
Mm.
cried when I left, and I gave her a big hug, and I told her she felt like my grandmother in the States because I was very close to my grandmother in Brazil. And
Hmm.
she reminded me a lot of my vovó, my grandmother in Brazil. We
Yes.
actually had, my grandmother and I had a lot in common because we were exactly 60 years apart. So in the Chinese horoscope, we're not
Yes.
only both tigers, but we're the same, there are 12-year cycles with the five different elements. So
Yes.
we were both wood tigers. So my
Okay.
husband always tells me, you do so much like your grandmother. And
Yes.
the interesting thing was that my grandmother was a passionate writer. I never thought I would write. She used to
Mm.
go and little post-it notes, get an idea, write it down. And I found myself doing that as I was writing these books. I never, if you had told me, more than 10 years ago that I would write books, I would have laughed.
Yes. And
So amazing.
yeah, absolutely. And you were saying just about being a dancer too. I have no dance background, no history with ballet, but from the people I've spoken with, m- these the people that dance just have this fire because you're competing for positions and you want to be the best on stage and you have to figure these dances out and stuff like that. So that sounds like a transferable skill to being able to acquire this apprenticeship and this level in Pilates too, where you have to really
Yeah.
dedicate yourself to these exercises and to movement and to teaching and finding your words and all these different things. So is that not just another performance getting through this whole program?
I don't like to think of it so much as a performance
Yep.
because it can be. And I guess I shouldn't be ashamed to say that. I remember when I was taking a lesson once from Juanita, she said, she did mention this is like a performance. And in that way, it felt like a wonderful transition because the thing I miss most, though, about dancing on stage, because I love to perform, was moving to music. And that's not really something that we do in Pilates.
Hmm.
But there can be that sense of performance. Um, but at the same time, that sense of competitiveness, I've learned that it really has to be competing with your own standards.
Yes.
And that is something that I do try to tell my students also, because I think that, well, comparison is the thief of joy. That's what I always tell my kids. They'll tell me,
Yes.
oh, but so-and-so has AirPods, why can't I? And I get a little bit nervous because how long are they going to wear them? They're going to wear them all the time. I don't know. And, oh, so-and-so has Snapchat, why can't I? Like, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
But it'll backfire on me too, because I'll say, oh, but so-and-so doesn't have Snapchat. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Oh, yes.
So it can get me. But I can see, like, I had a student, an international businesswoman come in, this was probably 2 summers ago.
Okay.
And she called me on the phone. This was just before I joined Instagram. I think I've only been on for a couple years. And she said to me on the phone, she said, just to let you know, I don't do Pilates like they do on Instagram. I just kind of brushed it off. I didn't know really what she meant by that.
Yes.
And then she came in for her lesson, and she was only here for a week. She had a couple of her kids at the IMG, the Bollettieri Sports Academy, for the summer. Yes. And so she said to me at the end of the lesson, she said, thank you so much. I know I don't do Pilates like they do on Instagram, but this was wonderful. And then I realized, we're seeing almost,
ouch.
I try to balance I'm not really using social media that much anymore. I love this. I love communicating directly with someone. I love teaching the Zoom classes where I see people instead of, like a faceless audience. I like to be able to interact. And I think 10 years of the combined Facebook and Instagram, it was enough. That was enough for me.
Right.
But I fear that sometimes to get likes and to get more attention, people are starting to put all of these things like headstands everywhere and places I never even saw them. And is it good for our industry? I don't know. Because then it's great to show things that are super advanced because it can inspire people. And I know that I've shown things like that people say, oh, I'll never do grasshopper on the reformer. I'll never do such and such a thing. I've tried to balance it with also pre-Pilates and things that I think everybody can do.
Right.
We have a full spectrum of exercises in Pilates. But are we doing something bad to our industry? Because as teachers, we like to show other teachers what we do, but we have to keep in mind students and potential students will also see what we're putting out there. And is this good to show that? I don't know. It's almost like a circus act.
It is a little bit of a circus act, and I think there needs to be some balance. I've been thinking about this a lot because there's times that we put a hard exercise out there, and for one person, that can inspire them to keep working towards that, and that's a good thing. And then another person can see that same exercise and shame the person. Oh, you're just showing off. You're just, you know what I mean? So there's two pieces to that where one is
it's hard.
Oh yeah, it's very hard because you put stuff out there and you hope that it does inspire some people, but at the same time, it's going to offend some people.
Well, you can't please everybody,
and you can't please everyone all the time, right?
Yeah. And that's something I definitely learned through my time on social media because I'm a kind of a sensitive soul. So I don't pay as much attention to the compliments as I should. I tend to dwell on the negative comments and the criticisms a little bit more.
Right.
So that can be difficult too as a person who puts content out there on social media. So you're right. It's a delicate balance. It's not easy. But we have to, where I draw the line is this something that I learned from Romana or one of her teachers? Okay. That for me feels like then I can show this. I'm not making anything up. I'm showing some things that are extreme, and I'm showing some things that are extremely accessible, and everything in between.
Yes.
That was my approach, at least, to doing this, and then also with the children's Pilates as well. It's difficult to find that balance, and I don't know if I did a great job with it, but I don't want to say I'm complacent, but I feel satisfied with what I put out there. And it's hard, and it's also hard to write things down and put them in a book. You know, I came
Yes.
from dance, and as an art form, ballet and dance, that's an ephemeral art form. That's something that, even though now I know that ballet companies and dance companies, with the situation now in the world, have to find an interactive way, and they're having to put performances on the internet. But it truly is not the same. It's not the same as feeling that energy in the audience. The
No,
dancers
right.
don't feel the energy from the audience members. You know, it's a
Hmm.
difference between, like, there's a matinee performance and the dancers will say, how's the audience? Oh, it's a dead audience today. They're sitting on their hands. Or it's the opening
Yes.
night. Oh, they're excited. You feed off of it. So as
Right.
a
Yeah.
dancer and as an audience member, it's completely different when you do this,
Yes.
when you perform, versus then going and writing something down. It's there forever. That
Yes,
is a big
exactly.
stress. And
Yes.
quite a few of my books, I went and I printed them, and then the perfectionist I am, like, oh, caught this. So my very patient graphic designer will fix it, tweak it, and then we re-upload the file. And so there are a lot of editions out there, but you can only do that so much,
Yes,
you
and at some
know?
point it's eternal, right? Like it's up
Right.
there. And
Yeah.
I was going to talk about something you said in a few different contexts along the way,
Hmm.
resilience.
Hmm.
Where does resilience tie into that personally, right? Because now we put something out there and then we get a negative comment, and then how much do we internalize that negative comment? Or when you're performing and you're out there on stage and then the audience is quote unquote sitting on their hands, are you able
Hmm.
to still bring the same energy as if they were standing up and cheering for you? How much of this external messaging do we internalize? Got a little bit of a freezing happening here. I don't know how much that you caught.
Yes, my phone rang. I don't
Ah,
know.
there you go.
I'm on a little 5S cell phone. My birthday's next week, and my family's insistent that I get like 11 or something. I'm like, this works fine, but
Too
sorry.
funny.
But you were talking about resilience. I did catch
Yes.
that.
Okay, so my
Okay.
question was like, how much of those external messages do
Yeah.
we internalize? Because there's always going to be a naysayer, there's always going to be a critique,
Yeah.
and there's going to be someone that is, like you said, did you catch my part
Okay.
about sitting on your
Yeah.
hands there?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. So I have a story for you.
sure.
I with quarantine, I stepped out of my comfort zone and I filmed a few videos to put on YouTube, tutorials of
Okay.
pre-Pilates, and then Gratz. I love my Gratz equipment. And they asked me to do a teaching tip, and they asked me to do a teaching tip on the Wonder Chair with a little box that they helped me develop, that we use for just a couple of exercises, maybe 4, that we
Okay.
do on the Wonder Chair. So at the time, I didn't have any students coming into the studio, so my 14-year-old, he was willing to be my student in this video. So I hadn't done a tutorial like that before. It was different when I did my pre-Pilates. It was a class. It didn't feel rushed. Here I had to kind of keep it tight and small. So
Concise.
yes, and in my first time taping it, I realized that I made the classic mistake that every apprentice and new teacher makes, where they try to tell you everything they know instead of just what you need to know. So I really rambled on. And I got a very negative comment, but this is from a person who is notorious in our industry for being very negative.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
And so my husband said, why are you taking what she's saying to heart?
Mm-hmm.
She even attacked me as a mother, saying, only your son would put up with you saying all of this, and no
What?
real student would do that. And it was
That's
heart-wrenching.
mean. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really mean. And so I contacted Gratz and I said, please, let's just remove that. I'm going to retape it. They said, don't worry. That's what she does. We know she does it. Everybody knows that. Don't pay any attention. I said, yes, but I have to admit that in one sense she was right. I knew that in my heart that I did what I shouldn't have. I was trying in this tiny little, I don't know, 2 minutes, try to say everything I knew about this exercise and forget that I'm really supposed to show in this teaching tip how I would really teach it. And it's hard to
Yes.
do that when you're being filmed. Like even Ramana, those videos we have of her teaching, it doesn't really capture the way she taught. You could tell she was a
Interesting.
bit, if you knew her, I can tell that she was nervous. It wasn't really the way she was when she was with us in the studio.
Okay.
You don't necessarily feel the same way when you're being taped teaching. So I redid it. My son obliged, and I sent them the tape, and they put it back out there, and I felt better. So I would
Hmm.
say this: for me, if I get a negative comment and I don't think that there is any truth to it, I will then say, well, that's hurtful, but I'm going to move on. If
Yes.
I see that there is some truth in it, I'm going to take my ego out of the equation. I'm going to use it as a learning experience to make myself better and not bitter. So
Yes.
that's the thing. That's
Well
why I
said.
did what I did. And so, my husband was just did not understand why that got to me so much, and why in his eyes I let her win by taking the video down. But in my
Hmm.
eyes, I realized that I needed to do something better. And I
Better.
learned from it. So
Yes.
I'm
That
still
is,
learning. I'm still a student too.
that's exactly it. That's exactly it. We are always students. There is a maturity in being able to sift through even meanness to see if there is some truth in it and
Yeah.
then make your pivots. And that's, I mean, that's a challenge, right? Because we feel right off the gate that it's an attack on our
Yeah.
personal, right? On our character,
Hmm.
our ability. Um, but yeah, so I've seen a few comments here. So Helen Hayes, Pilates, how are you? I remember these. These were wonderful tutorials. You and your son were perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there was a comment here earlier. Hi Maria from Indonesia. I have one of your books. Thanks for having these live shows, Martin. And someone was on your pre-Pilates Zoom class earlier and said it was great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
there's a wonderful interview I listened to. I was in the car, and the gentleman who was responsible for the education, like it was nothing to do with Pilates at all. Like he was a minister of education for a small country, and he had done some amazing reform. And as a result of his policies, the nation changed. There was less incarceration, there was higher graduation rates, and all these different things. Did amazing work. So everyone wanted him to be a prime minister or the next step up. The person interviewing him said, what are your thoughts on the fact that you've made these many reforms and has changed our nation just through your education reform? And his response was, well, the people that cheered for Jesus on Monday crucified him on Friday, so I don't really care about what people think.
If only it were that easy for me, but I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think that's important because there's this David Foster Wallace. He was an amazing author,
Hmm.
and there's some amazing quotes of his. And he said something like, "You would care so little about what people thought of you if you realized how seldom they do." We think that people are
True.
analyzing our every move.
Right.
Well, in reality, they're thinking about their own every move. And so maybe
Yes.
then there might be a comment direct toward us here and there, but they're not constantly obsessing over what we're doing.
Right.
So if we didn't put so much emphasis on what other people think, we could really be productive.
We could move
So
so far forward.
yeah, yeah. So I do try to remind myself of that, and I try to tell my kids that too. You would care so little about what people thought of you if you realized how seldom they are thinking. It doesn't sound, maybe it doesn't sound like a nice thing to say, but it's true.
It's true.
Especially in today's world, I think it's very true. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
there's the entitled generation. They're thinking about themselves a lot.
Hmm. Hmm.
So how
Yeah.
nice to sit down and have a conversation where we listen to each other.
Yes.
We have two ears and one mouth, so we need to listen more.
Absolutely. And then as that circles back around to our clients and their independent workouts, and then tuning out those voices on social media and those pictures of like real Pilates or good Pilates, Instagram
Hmm.
Pilates type thing, they could
Yeah.
they could find their work, they can find truth, I guess, in that sense of like what works for
Hmm.
best for them and all these different things, and not be influenced by those external opinions of what's right and what's wrong. They can
Yes.
find their true work. That's a
I
good
have
place
to
to be.
say that you reminded me of something too.
Hmm.
I will admit that when I first started teaching Pilates, I think I was a Pilates snob.
Okay.
I was taught in a way that this, they would say, oh, Romana would say, oh, Joe would churn in his urn if he saw what those people are doing on the reformer or this and that.
Uh,
To an extent, I understand, why create an exercise when we already have something in the method that will take care of that exact thing. So I respect that. And I do stick within the method that I was taught. And that also comes from, well, before I get into that, I'll just finish this thought.
yes.
So I respect that, but at the same time, by having to write down, for example, in my Pilates for Children manual, the first chapter was the fundamentals, how to bring fun into the fundamentals. But then I had
Yes.
to write down, why do we close the ribs? What does
Mm.
that mean? People always say soften the ribs, close the ribs. What does that mean? Well, engage your upper abdominals, engage the breathing. I had to write down, why do we anchor the spine? What a debate that is, right?
Yes. Yes.
Are we completely making the spine straight? No, we're lessening the curves. We need to keep the natural curves of the spine.
Mm.
But as I was researching, do we squeeze the seat? Do we cue to squeeze the seat? Well, it's like breathing. If someone is holding their breath, I'm going to tell them, make sure you breathe out. If
Hmm.
someone is with the mushy tushy, I'm going to say, make sure you activate your seat muscles. But for others, I'm not going to say it because they're going to tuck their pelvis or tense, right?
Yes.
It's hard to write it in a book because you have to look at the client in front of you, the
Yes.
person. I don't like to say body, but the person in front of
Hmm.
you. You
Yes.
have to look at the person. But I have to say that the process of writing that chapter gave me a new respect for people who are not in my organization, because I made it a point to read why they do things their way. And there was a point where I was reading, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name of the author, but he has an incredible method that he does. And I have his books from when I was a ballet dancer, Dance Imagery. If someone
Okay.
knows the name, they can write it down. I just can't remember right now, but he uses, and he has a wonderful book that I got that was more recent on cueing, and he did it
Okay.
specifically for like Pilates teachers.
Hmm.
And I really respect him. I have always enjoyed his books, but when I was reading one of them, he was talking about why anchoring the spine was not good.
Hmm.
And I know this sounds like a true nerd moment. I started crying because I respect him so much that I thought, have I been doing this wrong? Franklin, yes, Franklin
Yeah.
method. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
So I respect him so much that when he in his writing was saying that it wasn't good, because think of it, if you're jumping, your spine can't be rigid like a pole because it has to take the pressure. You can't,
Yes.
otherwise it's too much.
Yes.
But then, yes, Eric Franklin, thank you.
Yes.
So my husband walked in the door. I think he had Tai Chi that morning. I was sitting at the dining room table reading his book, crying. And
Oh.
he came to me and he said, "What is it now?"
Yeah.
And
What is it now?
I said, I think maybe there's some truth to this not anchoring the spine thing. And he said, listen, because he was a dancer, he knows. He said, when you're cueing somebody to engage their abdominals, you're not telling them to create a rigid spine. You're telling them to lessen the curves in their spine so that they can protect their back. I personally don't want to do the 100 with daylight under my back. I'm going to anchor my spine, but maybe to do that, I'll lift my legs up to 90 degrees and I won't have them at eye level, or I'll mix it up and do a few sets legs lower and then lift.
Mhm.
So I felt, oh, okay,
It's
I'm
yes.
not
It's
doing
not
this
so
wrong.
much an absolute, is what you're getting at.
No, no. So I have to say that in the process of writing, I am no longer a Pilates snob. I can read what other
Mm.
people say with a much more open mind, and yet I can still feel confident that the way I teach is the right way for me. It feels like the right way for my clients. And then going back to the other thought that I was wanting to express, the reason why I personally choose to stick with teachers from the Romano lineage is because when I was a dancer, I learned all types of styles of ballet. I started with the Royal Academy of Dance. I did all of their 5 children's exams. They would fly in a teacher from England and once from Australia. The whole room was white. All the mirrors were covered with white paper, white tablecloth. You couldn't see and they would give us a set syllabus that we had memorized, and then they would ask us, what muscle do you use when you're doing rond de jambe en l'air? What are you doing? It was wonderful training. And then I went to Boston Ballet School, and that was more of an eclectic training. And then I went to a teacher, Jackie Kronsberg, who was Balanchine style. And then I went back to Boston Ballet, and I worked with Madame Tatiana Lagarde, and that was pure Russian style. She took us, and our 2.5-hour class for months was simply at the bar. We didn't even make it to the center of the room because she completely retrained us.
Oh, yes.
And then I worked with my ballet coach, a very famous ballet dancer who was Baryshnikov's rival, Fernando Bujones, who died at a very young age of 50 of melanoma. And his was kind of a mix with his Cuban training and American training. So the point is, as a ballet dancer, I learned a lot of methods, a lot of styles.
Yes.
It was very good to know those styles. I'm glad. I wouldn't take it back for the world. But I also will say that it can be confusing. There are many ways to get into a pirouette.
Yes.
You can start with your arms straight. You can start with your arm bent. You can start with both knees bent. You can start with the back leg straight. You can turn with your arms crossed. You can turn with them here. There are so many ways.
Yes.
So how are you going to perfect one if you're doing so many, if there's so many in your head? So that's why I took that experience as a dancer. So I learned I'm not going to rush my apprenticeship. I'm going to enjoy the time being a student. And I'm going to stick with this method that feels right to me. Because I don't want to get confused. I don't want to forget, oh, who taught me this? I want to know that when I'm teaching my student and they ask me, oh, this is Romana, absolutely, this is from Romana or one of her teachers.
Yes.
That she handpicked. She had a handful of teachers that she picked, like the wonderful Laurie Coleman Brown you had on.
Yes.
I think she downplayed her importance with Romana, I want to say.
I think so.
Oh, you have to know that she is big stuff. Like,
she's a big dog.
She's amazing.
Yeah,
you have to know that. So everyone has to know that. She's phenomenal.
I picked that up. And you know what, Christina, we have 2 minutes left. Is that crazy? How fast that went?
It went by fast. I hope I didn't do too much.
I loved your stories. And like, I'm sure in the same way that we said Laurie Brown was like bigger than we think, I think the same of you. I think that you are just, you're so rich with just knowledge, and those books sound like they're just amazing. I'll
have to send you some.
I love that, especially with the 14-year-old in my household. Yeah, that'd be so awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate what you're doing. I think I was telling my students in Zoom today that what I love most about social media and in the Pilates world, what Pilatesology does, when Gratz Pilates does interviews, what Kinetic Pilates does when they interview some of our teachers from Romana. I love these interviews because I want to see, like you said at the very beginning today, you can choose a teacher because of their resume, but you'll stay with them because of really their personality.
Yes.
What do they bring aside from these exercises? And I've really learned that too. You know, I've gone to my teacher Anthony in Princeton, and I said, I want you to watch me teach. And one of the times he said to me, well, that lesson, you didn't laugh enough.
Oh,
so
yes.
I'm like, yeah, right, yeah. And that's something I think I am kind of a funny person, and I do like to tell jokes when I teach. And we can't get too serious. And too drill sergeant. We have to make this enjoyable and make this something that people are going to look forward to doing again and again.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, that's what Romana did. That's why was Romana so great? Because she made you feel special.
Yes.
Didn't matter, you know, even if she did say some things that hurt my feeling, but she always made me feel special too.
Yes.
And that's how I learned how to take a comment that was critical and take what I needed from it. It was from Romana also.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Martin.